Remember when you were a kid, you had that moment, that event, that life moment that stuck with you, it impacted you, and it stayed with you for the rest of your life. We've all had those events as kids. For me, that was a door. It was my father's bedroom door. Let me explain. My father used and sold drugs throughout my childhood. His bedroom was his office. And I recall looking through those cracks of that door, and I would see all kinds of drug paraphernalia. I'd see marijuana. I'd see cocaine. I'd see scales. There were baggies of weed on the scales. There were tin foils of cocaine wrapped up and put in a certain spot. There was bamboo rolling paper all over the place. And what I saw through those cracks in that door, they demoralized me. They crushed me. They confused me. They made me angry. And as a kid, I hated having friends over because my father would smoke weed all the time in that room, and the whole house would reek of weed. And when you're an 8, 9, and 10-year-old kid, there's nothing more embarrassing than having your friends come over, particularly one kid that I knew, his name was Louis. Louis had a mouth. Louis didn't care. He didn't care who heard him, he didn't care what he said. And so Louis would come in the house, and inevitably, he would yell out, "Yo, man, your house smell of weed." Yeah, it did smell of weed. And I didn't want him there. I didn't want anyone there. It was excruciating to have to tell my friends and to lie to them about why they couldn't come over or what was going on or I had something going on, my mom is sick. I just would say anything to keep them from coming to my house. And what happened was that door, the metaphorical meaning of that door, the oppression, the anger, the pain, the violence, the drugs, it caused me to shut down. And I wouldn't open up to others. I kept everything to myself. I became an expert at repressing my feelings, repressing my confusion. Because the one thing you have to understand, I learned at a young age that I wasn't allowed in that room. I wasn't allowed to go beyond the threshold of that door. I learned the painful lesson of that because my father, he spoke with his hands. And he spoke with thick leather belts that had very big buckles at the end of them. And the bruises and the welts that I shamefully concealed under my clothing taught me the painful lesson that you don't go through that door. You don't go in that room. So I struggled. And then in January of 1980, there was a 26-year-old black man from the island of Jamaica who was ordained a priest in the Roman Catholic Church. And he was assigned to the Diocese of Brooklyn. And a week after his ordination, this young man, his name was Frank Black, he was assigned to my home parish in Jamaica, Presentation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, mind you, the priests in that parish, as far as I remember, they were all incredible. They were all awesome for the community. They were great for the kids. And yet, Father Frank was of a different breed. Father Frank taught us that we could go beyond and be much more than what our circumstances would otherwise dictate that we were supposed to be. That touched my soul. Because up until that point, I didn't know what I was. But he taught me that I could be more than what my circumstances would otherwise dictate. And I took that to heart. And I realized that he was right, that I could do that. And so he became a surrogate father to me. He was a man of inspiration, a man of transformative charisma, and a man of love. He became a surrogate father to me, a father that I never had. Now, when I turned around 16, I realized I'd had enough. I'd had enough of the violence. I'd had enough of the drugs. I'd had enough of the beatings. I had enough of the craziness. I had enough of the haphazard nature, the complete chaos that was my life. And I realized I was going to teach my father a lesson. I knew what I wanted to do, but I was petrified. So one night, when my father wasn't home, I walked up to that door, and I extended my trembling hand toward the doorknob. Now, mind you, this door caused me all kinds of consternation, all kinds of fear, but I was determined. I went to that door, and I slowly turned the doorknob, and I can still hear the creak of that doorknob and the creaking of the door as it opened. And I went into the room, and I knew where my father kept his stash of cocaine. And I knew exactly where the tins were. So I grabbed 2 fistfuls, as much as I could, of the cocaine, the tins of cocaine. I ran out of that room through the threshold of pain that was that door. I put those tins of cocaine into the garbage. I took that garbage outside, and it was thrown out that night. That was going to teach him a lesson. I was going to be the hero. Well, later that night, my father got home, and the calm and the quiet that was my house became absolute chaos. He went into a berserk rage of violence, cursing, screaming. Things were flying all over the house, punching his fists through the walls, screaming and cursing and threatening. And I realized that was because of me. Now, I had a cousin who was in the family business, and my father was convinced that my cousin had somehow gotten into our house and stolen his stuff to sell on his own. And my father said he was going to take care of my cousin. So after what seemed like an eternity, my father stormed out of the house to wreak havoc on other people's lives. And I remember sitting there, and I was thinking, my God, I just caused all this craziness. There were holes all over the place. Anything that wasn't nailed down was strewn about the house. That was my fault. And on top of all that, now he's going to go and kill my cousin. The pain, the confusion, and the agony was unreal. So I realized at that moment there was only one thing to do. I had to run away. I'd had enough. It was just too much. I ran away. I ran out of there. I got the hell out of there. I ran away. But of course, me being me, I ran away to presentation, to the rectory. I ran away to go talk to Father Frank. I got to the rectory, and the first thing Father Frank did, picked up the phone, called my mom. Lily, don't worry, Ralph's here. He's okay. I'll take care of this. He's all right. Hung up the phone. I let loose with a torrent of emotion, a complete waterfall of feelings. I told him about the pain. I told him about the lies. I told him about the false impression that I was trying to live up to. I told him about the beatings. I told him about the drugs. I told him everything that I had been hiding for years. And he listened. And for the first time in my life, I had someone listen to me. For the first time in my life, I was able to share my truth, as embarrassing as it was. And as much as my friend Louie would laugh at me for saying all this stuff, I let it out. And Father Frank spoke in very measured, very loving, very caring, very nurturing words. And he taught me that it was okay to acknowledge my faults. It was okay to acknowledge my pain. It was okay to be angry at what was going on at home. And while I could not divest myself of being my father's son, I could hopefully be a son who one day could be a good father. I had Father Frank to thank for that. He taught me that. Now, that's not to say that I've had a charmed life since that transformative event in the rectory all those years ago. Far from it. The door, the metaphorical door, was never far off. Was it while I was in high school, or while I was a college student at Georgetown down in DC, or during my law school years at St. John's University, and then during my career as a prosecutor in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, where I became a renowned trial attorney, where I did great things, and then later on in private practice as a trial attorney throughout the courts of the state. I've earned a reputation of being an incredible trial attorney and a great advocate. And yet, the door was always there. The door never really left. But I'm proud to say that since those years, I've achieved great things, and I'm proud of my achievements. But again, even during those prideful moments, the door would come back. And yet there's the door closing in on that dream, trying to close it, trying to crush it, trying to keep me from attaining it. There are times when I've tried to be the best husband and father that I could be, and yet there's the door creaking open, reminding me of my insecurities, reminding me of my vulnerabilities, reminding me that you can't do it. You can't do it. You're gonna fall short. And I had the nurturing experience of Father Frank to ground me and to bring me back and to shove that door aside. Now, my father and I have forged, I guess you could say, an uneasy reconciliation in the years since my mother passed away very suddenly back on July 26th of 2002. Ironically, my father found Jesus. And my father recently apologized to me for all the things that he did to me and to my family. And while obviously I accepted that apology, and the apology meant something to me, when my kids asked me, "Dad, what feelings do you have for your father?" I can't say that I love him. I can't say that I have any real feelings one way or another for him. I feel pity. I guess I feel some sense of compassion, because obviously he never had a Father Frank in his life. But either way, I am at peace with the complex consequences of being my father's son. Thank you very much. Peace and love to everybody.